Daniel Harwick sees a quiet black girl at the palace parade and thinks she's just another silent shadow beside him. Another asset. Another secret. But what he doesn't know. Her pinky moves. Just once. And Staff Sergeant Vale sees everything. Stick around, because when the guard breaks formation and Harwick Falls explodes across the internet, Daniel's platinum watch won't measure success. It'll timestamp his downfall. Justice doesn't always march in uniform. Sometimes it signals with a single finger and brings an empire crashing down. Don't forget to drop a comment telling us where you're watching from and what time you found this video. Also, hit that subscribe button. Daniel Harwick's fingers dug deeper into the girl's shoulder as the palace parade spectacle unfolded before them. The rhythmic march of the royal guards should have been perfect cover, their ceremonial precision drawing every eye. Instead, that damned staff sergeant was breaking formation. The expensive Italian suit that had guaranteed anonymity now felt like a spotlight. And the platinum watch, usually such a comforting symbol of power, suddenly seemed to mock him with each glint in the summer sun. But what Daniel didn't see, what no one else noticed, was the tiny movement of the girl's pinky finger. "Smile," Daniel Harwick hissed through clenched teeth, maintaining his own practiced grin. The crowd's excitement had shifted somehow, their phone cameras no longer focused on the parade but swiveling towards him. That guard, Sergeant Vale according to his nameplate, was definitely watching. The fool had noticed something. But how? Daniel Harwick had orchestrated dozens of these extractions. His reputation for meticulous planning was legendary in certain circles. The girl trembled slightly under his grip. Had she signaled somehow? Impossible. He'd been too careful, too controlling. Yet there it was again. That subtle shift in Vale's stance, the minute tightening around his eyes that spoke of recognition. The watch felt heavy now, its weight a reminder of everything Daniel Harwick stood to lose. "Sir," the voice cut through the parade music like a knife. "A moment of your time?" Staff Sergeant Vale's tone was courteous, but his eyes were steel. The surrounding crowd began to whisper, phones recording everything. Daniel Harwick's heart rate spiked, though his face remained carefully neutral. A career criminal's greatest asset was always control, of situations, of people, of himself. "Is there a problem, Sergeant?" "You don't belong here," Vale said quietly. "And she doesn't belong with you." Daniel Harwick's voice dripped with manufactured concern, even as his mind raced through escape scenarios. The platinum watch caught the light again as he gestured dismissively, its gleam now seeming less like success and more like handcuffs waiting to happen. The crowd had definitely noticed now. #Royal Guard Hero was probably already trending. One tourist's phone live-streamed everything, the red recording light as accusatory as Vale's steady gaze. The girl's shoulder tensed under Daniel Harwick's grip. Hope beginning to replace fear in her posture. "Actually, sir, there is." Vale's hand moved to his weapon, smooth and practiced. "That watch you're wearing, it's quite distinctive. Matches the description of one stolen in a trafficking case last month." The platinum watch. His trophy, his symbol of untouchable success, had become his undoing. Daniel Harwick's carefully constructed world began to crack, starting with that damned timepiece that had finally run out. Hours spent selecting the perfect watch, the perfect suit, the perfect cover. Years of successful operations built on control and fear. How had it all unraveled so quickly? One guard's attention, one girl's silent signal, one moment of hubris displaying a trophy that should have remained hidden. Have you ever felt your perfect plan shatter in an instant? Type tick-tock if you've ever seen someone's power crumble in real time. The parade continued its march, but Daniel Harwick's world had stopped moving. In the growing whispers and camera flashes, one question echoed. How many others would his fall expose? The watch kept ticking, counting down the seconds of freedom remaining to international trafficker Daniel Harwick, who had finally made his last mistake. Daniel Harwick's fingers drummed against the solid gold watch that had become his signature piece, a trophy from his first successful operation in Moscow. The persistent gaze of Staff Sergeant Roderick Vale burned into his consciousness, threatening to unravel years of meticulous planning and careful image cultivation. Each passing moment felt like walking on razor's edge, his heart thundering against his designer suit. "Everything appears to be in order, sir," a junior security officer had said just hours earlier, examining Daniel Harwick's immaculate credentials. The same credentials that had taken years to perfect, connections cultivated in embassy parties, charitable galas, and high society functions. Every detail crafted to present the image of a successful international businessman with a passion for philanthropy. But Vale's eyes held something different. Recognition, perhaps? Daniel Harwick's mind raced back to Singapore, to the detective who had almost caught him 3 years ago. The same intuitive gleam, the same methodical observation. The memory made his collar feel too tight, the air too thick. A news alert flashed on his phone. Another trafficking ring busted in Eastern Europe. Daniel Harwick's stomach churned as he read the details. The perpetrator had been caught because of a pattern recognition algorithm developed by Interpol, cross-referencing travel patterns and social events. The same algorithm that might already be processing his own carefully planned movements. Scientific studies had shown that predators often displayed certain behavioral patterns, micro-expressions, subtle body language cues, specific speech patterns. Daniel Harwick had studied these extensively, learned to mask them, yet now he wondered if Vale had been trained in the same research. The guard's positioning, the way he scanned the crowd while maintaining peripheral awareness of Harwick's location, suggested advanced behavioral analysis training. The weight of the watch grew heavier as Daniel Harwick recalled his mentor's words from 15 years ago. Success isn't about the perfect plan. It's about perfect adaptation. Marcus had taught him everything: how to blend in, how to create unquestionable covers, how to move invisible through the highest circles of society. Marcus, who now rotted in a maximum security prison because he'd failed to recognize when an operation had been compromised. Daniel Harwick's hand trembled slightly as he reached for his phone, scrolling through news archives. 3 similar operations had been uncovered in the past month alone. The pattern was clear. Law enforcement was getting better, smarter, more connected. The old methods were becoming obsolete. "Sir, would you mind stepping this way for a moment?" A young security officer approached, his manner casual but his eyes alert. "Just a routine check." Daniel Harwick felt his carefully constructed world begin to crack. Every security camera suddenly felt like an accusation, every glance from the crowd a potential witness. The weight of the watch seemed to burn against his wrist now, no longer a trophy but a shackle connecting him to every past crime. Have you ever watched your perfect world begin to crumble? Felt the ground shifting beneath your feet, the walls closing in? I built this empire on precision and control, but now I feel control slipping through my fingers like sand. Is this how Marcus felt in those final moments before everything fell apart? Type Empire Falls if you've ever felt your perfect plan unraveling. The parade continued around him, but Daniel Harwick barely heard the music anymore. All he could focus on was Staff Sergeant Vale's systematic movement through the crowd, each step bringing him closer to the truth that Daniel Harwick had spent years hiding. The watch ticked on his wrist, counting down to what felt increasingly like an inevitable end. Daniel Harwick's heart hammered against his designer suit as he watched Staff Sergeant Roderick Vale speak into his radio. The private jet idling at the exclusive terminal suddenly felt miles away, not the mere 20 minutes it had been moments ago. Every second that ticked by on his platinum watch, once a trophy of successful deals, now mockingly counted down to his destruction. Through the parade crowds, more palace guards materialized like sharks scenting blood. Daniel Harwick's carefully constructed world of international connections and ironclad alibis began cracking at its foundation. The girl beside him, merchandise that should have been worth millions, stood straighter now, her eyes holding a defiance that made his stomach churn. "Sir, please remain where you are," another guard called out, the words cutting through the parade music like a knife. Daniel Harwick forced his features into a mask of aristocratic indignation, though cold sweat trickled down his spine. "Do you know who I am?" he snapped, but his voice wavered, a predator sensing the tables turning. His phone buzzed. The message from his contact at the airport made his blood run cold. "Security alert. All private flights grounded." Years of careful planning, of building an untouchable empire, were dissolving like smoke. Daniel Harwick's fingers trembled as he deleted messages, knowing it was futile. They would find everything. The parade drums continued their relentless beat, but now they sounded like a funeral march. Each boom matched his racing pulse as he watched Staff Sergeant Vale approach with measured steps. The girl shifted away from him, and Daniel Harwick realized with rising panic that his grip on her arm had loosened, his instinct for self-preservation overriding everything else. His watch caught the sunlight, the same watch he'd bought after his first successful transaction. Now its weight felt like an anchor dragging him down. Daniel Harwick's mind raced through his contingency plans, but they crumbled like sand castles against the tide of reality. His buyers would disappear at the first hint of trouble, his contacts would deny ever knowing him, and his carefully laundered fortune would be frozen within hours. The crowd's cheering seemed to take on a mocking tone as more guards approached. Daniel Harwick's phone buzzed again, this time with news that made his knees weak. His face was already being circulated to airport security. The comfortable invisibility he'd operated in for years was shattered. "Your empire falls today?" the girl whispered, her voice steady with the certainty of someone who knew justice was finally catching up. Staff Sergeant Vale's radio crackled with confirmation of Daniel Harwick's identity, and the words that followed destroyed his last hope of escape. "Interpol has been notified." The international web he'd woven, once his protection, would now ensure his downfall. Every airport, every port, every border would soon know his face. The watch ticked on, each second marking the death of Daniel Harwick's carefully constructed world. The parade continued around them, but he barely heard it now over the roaring in his ears. His empire wasn't just crumbling, it was being dismantled with surgical precision, and he was forced to watch, powerless to stop it. Type Harwick. Falls. If you've ever witnessed someone's power crumble in an instant, the girl's distress signal, such a small thing, had triggered an avalanche that would bury him. Daniel Harwick's legacy would not be one of wealth and influence, but of shame and justice served. As the guards closed in, he realized with crushing clarity that he'd never truly been as untouchable as he'd believed. The hunter had become the hunted, and there was nowhere left to run. The symphony of gasps rippled through the palace courtyard as Daniel Harwick's manicured fingers fumbled with his Brioni suit sleeve. His platinum watch, once a symbol of his carefully crafted legitimacy, now betrayed him, catching on expensive fabric as he reached for the concealed beretta. The morning sun, which had earlier gilded his facade of respectability, now felt like a spotlight of accusation. "Stand down!" Staff Sergeant Vale's command carried across the courtyard, but Daniel couldn't afford to comply. Years of meticulous planning, of building his reputation as an international businessman, were unraveling faster than his composure. The girl, his merchandise, his guarantee of another 7-figure payment, was slipping away into the crowd. Daniel's heart hammered against his designer tie as he assessed his options. The palace walls that had seemed so grand now felt like prison barriers. The guard formation was breaking, and with it his last chance at maintaining his carefully constructed lie. "Nobody move!" he barked, but his voice cracked, betraying the desperation beneath the polished exterior. The weapon finally freed from its holster, Daniel's hand trembled. An unprecedented betrayal from muscles usually steady enough to charm diplomats and deceive border agents. The crowd's collective intake of breath created a vacuum of anticipation. Phones emerged like flowers after rain, their cameras capturing the moment his mask crumbled. Hat Harwick exposed flashed across a nearby tourist's screen, the virtual world already declaring its verdict. Daniel's gaze darted between the approaching guards and the service entrance, his planned escape route now seeming impossibly distant. The girl had disappeared into the safety of the crowd, taking with her millions in potential profit. Daniel Harwick's designer shoes scraped against centuries-old stone as he backed away, each step erasing years of carefully maintained appearances. The watch caught the sun again, its gleam now resembling handcuffs more than luxury. His finger tightened on the trigger, but Staff Sergeant Vale's team was closing in with military precision. "Your empire's falling, Harwick," Vale called out, his voice carrying the weight of justice. "Drop the weapon." A bead of sweat traced down Daniel's temple, staining his custom-made collar. The roar of social media spreading his exposure merged with the blood pounding in his ears. His carefully curated international contacts would be scattering like rats from a sinking ship, their phones already buzzing with alerts about his true nature. Type "mask off" if you've ever witnessed someone's true colors revealed. The first impact came from behind, a tackle that sent Daniel Harwick, terror merchant disguised as businessman, crashing to the courtyard stones. His watch face shattered on impact, time literally stopping as his freedom ended. The handcuffs clicked with brutal finality, the sound echoing off palace walls that had witnessed centuries of justice served. Daniel Harwick," Staff Sergeant Vale's voice carried official weight. "You're under arrest for human trafficking." As they led him away, Daniel caught his reflection in a palace window. His tie askew, his suit dusty, his carefully maintained mask of respectability shattered beyond repair. The headline, "International Businessman Revealed as Trafficking Kingpin," already scrolled across a nearby tourist's phone, his fall from grace spreading at the speed of social media. The girl he'd planned to traffic stood protected behind a wall of guards, her eyes meeting his with the strength of someone who'd helped bring down an empire. Daniel Harwick's watch lay broken on the courtyard stones, its hands frozen at the moment justice finally caught up with him. Share this video if you believe every mask eventually cracks. Let's make "Had Harwick Falls" trend and show that justice catches up to everyone. Daniel Harwick stared at the steel handcuffs biting into his wrists where his $80,000 platinum Patek Philippe had gleamed just hours ago. The harsh fluorescent lights of the holding cell cast unflattering shadows across his once immaculate suit, now wrinkled and stained from the takedown. Through the small window of his cell, he could see reporters gathering like vultures, their cameras flashing with predatory intensity. International trafficking kingpin Daniel Harwick apprehended at Royal Palace. The words from a nearby TV pierced his consciousness, each syllable hammering home the reality of his situation. His empire, built over 2 decades of careful manipulation and false identities, had crumbled because of one guard's determined vigilance. The watch. His fingers instinctively moved to touch it, finding only bare skin. That timepiece had been his signature, his trophy from each successful operation. Now it sat in an evidence bag, its platinum surface reflecting the truth he'd hidden for so long. 23 victims' names were meticulously engraved on its back. His private ledger of triumph turned damning evidence. Social media exploded with updates about his capture. Royal Guard hero trended worldwide, accompanied by Staff Sergeant Vale's photo, the man who'd spotted that single, desperate signal from the girl. Daniel Harwick's own face, carefully kept out of databases for years, now plastered across every news channel and Twitter feed. Type, "Justice served if you believe one person's courage can change everything," scrolled across the bottom of the news broadcast, followed by thousands of responses flooding in. The cell's silence amplified his thoughts. "I built an empire on the belief that no one would care enough to look closely," Daniel Harwick whispered to the empty cell. "One guard's moral courage proved me wrong." The words tasted bitter, like truth finally breaking through decades of practiced lies. Outside his cell, he could hear discussions about extradition, multiple jurisdictions claiming their right to prosecute Daniel Harwick first. The Interpol agent's words echoed down the corridor. "His capture has opened investigations in 12 countries, the evidence from his watch alone." The sound of heavy doors opening drew his attention. A group of rescued victims' families had gathered in the viewing area, their eyes meeting his through the reinforced glass. Among them stood the girl from the parade, now safely reunited with her parents. Her eyes held no fear now, only triumph. "Share this story to show how evil crumbles in the face of courage," the news anchor's voice carried from the guard station's TV. In that moment, Daniel Harwick understood the final truth. His greatest weapon, the belief that people would look away, had become his undoing. One person's refusal to ignore the signs had triggered an avalanche of justice. His watch, his meticulous record of crimes, would now count down time in a different way, marking years of sentences instead of moments of freedom. Drop 1. If you believe in the power of speaking up, flashed across social media feeds worldwide, accompanying his mugshot. The cell doors closed with a definitive clang, sealing Daniel Harwick's fate. His watch, now in an evidence locker, would soon be displayed in the International Justice Museum. A reminder that no empire built on suffering can stand against the power of one person's moral courage. In the end, Daniel Harwick's legacy would serve not as a testament to criminal genius, but as proof that the darkest of evils can be brought down by the simplest act of paying attention. The timing of his downfall, like the watches he'd so proudly collected, had been precise, but not in the way he'd planned.